being faithful to God on these controversial issues is not really theologically complicated. It's not difficult. It's really clear. The difficulty comes when we have to pay a price to be faithful for not only what the Scripture obviously teaches on a host of issues that are controversial, but be faithful in the face of and in the teeth of serious pushback from the culture that begins to really cost us.
We are here with Greg Koukl, apologist, author, professor, funny guy, right?
Yeah. I don't know about the last part, but okay.
Yeah. So you've covered a couple of different topics in this day 2 of the conference, but
That's right.
I kind of want to focus on the teaching you just gave, which had a lot to do with culture and sexual confusion and confusion among believers. It's an emotional topic for a lot of us because if we went through, every one of us could probably pick someone who we've known who has walked away from the Lord and has now become part of this sexually confused culture. And it's heartbreaking. Part of the heartbreak, though, is what you touched on and started with, is that we are seeing a lot of believers who are falling into this confusion, for lack of a better phrase. Why is this happening among Christians, some of whom we think, we thought we were on the same page, we thought they read the same Bible we did, and now...
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons, and one of them has to do with understanding the truth as God sees it. In other words, understanding God's world or understanding the nature of reality. To me, these are the same thing. In other words, the Scripture, if it gives us truth about the way things actually are, it's speaking to the nature of reality, okay? And if that's the case, there's a lot of things about reality that we'd be able to figure out without having a Bible. And it turns out that these things kind of go together. I mean, just takes this sexuality issue, binary sexuality. And this is controversial now, but it's only controversial because of cultural pressure. Nobody was confused about this for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, okay? It's only been recently that this confusion seems to have taken hold in our culture, and there certainly is no confusion in the Scripture. So the Scripture describes for us what the world is actually like that we experience, and there's a fit there, okay? But because of the pressure of the culture, people are wondering whether the scriptural view is actually true. Okay, no, what I was suggesting a few moments ago is that the scriptural view completely comports with common sense. That's why you don't need Scripture to figure most of these things out. And that's why culture has figured it out on its own, because they're in touch with the nature of reality when it comes to sexuality and gender and marriage and children and things like that. Okay, it's just been recently. So I think part of the problem, and the biggest part of the problem, is the pressure from the culture, okay? Because it's not just that the culture is telling us to think differently. It is doing that. It's telling us that if you don't think the way we think, we are going to punish you. And I'm using my words advisedly, because there are people not just being ostracized viciously from their groups because they don't have the right ideas. There are people that are losing their means of livelihood, their ability to support their family. They're losing their jobs. They're losing their respect in the community. They're losing a lot. We've seen this pattern before. And it's happened in lots of cultures. So we have historical records of how this works, and the pattern is in place now. Now, America's different than other cultures, or has been. It's radically changing, and it's hard to tell where it's going to go. But the point here is that it's really costing Christians something to stay faithful. But being faithful, though difficult given the cultural pressure, is not theologically difficult. It isn't as if these issues are ambiguous in Scripture, nor in reality. And so a lot what I talked about in this prior session here was that being faithful to God on these controversial issues is not really theologically complicated. It's not difficult. It's really clear. The difficulty comes when we have to pay a price to be faithful for not only what the Scripture obviously teaches on a host of issues that are controversial, but be faithful in the face of and in the teeth of serious pushback from the culture that begins to really cost us. I mean, some people, young people, they lose all their friends. Why? Because they don't have the right view. That's why. So there is that kind of persecution that's happening. And I think that combination of things, the biggest one being cultural pressure, causes people to doubt whether the Bible really means what it says or whether the Bible is accurate. Well, the Bible must not be accurate. Set the Bible aside. Look at the world. I mean, there's a fit there between the world and the Bible. That means you can figure a lot of these things out by yourself, which cultures have done for thousands of years. Now we're in a different situation. Now the lines have been drawn in the sand. The culture's got its dukes up, and it's fighting. And it's my way or the highway as far as the culture is concerned. And by the way, I'm not saying anything controversial. Everybody knows this is the case right now.
You talked about this pro-gay theology that is kind of gaining popularity, right?
Yes.
I feel like because there is a price to be paid if we're going to stand up for the truth.
Yes.
Culturally, societally, especially for young people.
Right.
It's hard. Are Christians adopting this false theology? Because to them, it would be so much easier if we could just pretend that Scripture says, okay, this is okay to do, and so that kind of makes it easier. Then there's nothing to be sacrificed, right?
I think there are two reasons why we see this big shift, because there's always been, in the last 150 years, there's been pro-gay theology, attempts to reinterpret what appear to be very clear scriptural injunctions against any sex outside of monogamous, long-term heterosexual marriage, okay? And what we see going on right now is a new version of this, and there are two factors involved why people are switching over. One of them is because you got a massive part of the non-Christian culture that is really pushing hard, and they are labeling the Christian view in very particular ways. So it's not just intolerant anymore. You're bigoted if you don't hold the view the culture does. You're hateful. Now, Christians don't want to be hateful, and in fact, Christians aren't hateful, but the word has everything's been redefined. So if you don't go along and affirm what I'm saying, that is an example of intolerance, lack of equity, it's a discriminatory in your attitude, you know. And so just having the wrong point of view puts you at odds with the culture, and they're going to make you pay. Okay, there's another little piece of this, though, that is also part of the picture, the puzzle, and that is not only is there general pressure coming from the culture, but when people who are committed to one theological view, because it seems the Scripture teaches it, are then confronted in their own family with people they love, with people that are not comporting with the scriptural admonitions. So they have kids that turn out gay or transgender or whatever, people that they care about love. And because the cultural pressure is, if you don't affirm, then you're not accepting of me. If you don't affirm my new choice in life, then you're not loving to me, and worse than that, you're hateful to me. Well, the parent does not want to be characterized as hateful or unloving, but the only option they are given by the members of their family to be in relationship with them is to affirm and promote and even celebrate this new lifestyle. Now they got a problem. Their family or Scripture. Well, they don't want to leave God, so how do they hang on to both? Well, maybe I'm wrong about Scripture. And I'm telling you, this happens all the time, where people who held one view theologically for very good theological reasons then have a member of their family that becomes gay or has gender dysphoria or wants to become trans or something like that. All of a sudden their theology changes. Well, the Bible didn't change. Did you misunderstand what it originally taught? Well, they'll say, yes, we have a confused theology because there were cultural circumstances that nobody ever told us about, and so now we know about them. And so for 2,000 years, Christians, and for 4,000 years or so, 3,000 years, Jews have been confused about this. Why is it people think that we know better now, 2,000 years after Christ, about the culture and the circumstances back then than the people in the moment? How could we be wrong about this for thousands of years? Okay, I mean, that seems to be hard to swallow. And I think the answer is we weren't wrong. What happened is the culture changed, and so you changed your theology, and you adopted a revision of theology that is not well justified by the text, but you've gussied up to look attractive and appealing to yourself and to other people, with certain kinds of justifications, and so now you're comfortable with being a Christian even though you're theologically gay affirming, and that means that you can have a more satisfying relationship with someone close to you who is also gay or trans or something like that. That's what's going on
so
here.
We have to wrap it up, but I need to ask you one final quick question. It's a big one, but if you could do it briefly, that would be great. I feel like we as believers are really missing, I know, we as believers are really, I feel, in a lot of instances, missing the boat on how we love these people. We know we can't condone their sin, but we feel like we have to go the totally opposite way. Either we avoid them, or we come off as judgmental and self-righteous and religious. How do we love these people to Christ, right? Because so many Christians think, well, I need to make them straight again. Well, that's not our job.
Yeah, that's true. A qualification, though. I don't think we come off as self-righteous and judgmental as much as other people say, okay? Mm-hmm. That's their characterization because we're standing firm for the truth. And they're characterizing that. That's judgmental, that's intolerant, that's hateful. You Christians are hateful people, so now we got bad cue. We got a bad reputation in the culture because we're this kind of people. No, we're not this kind of people. This is the way you have characterized us because we won't agree with you. Because this is just a sophisticated straw man. But to answer your question directly, think about Jesus, John chapter 1, the incarnation, full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. You see, Jesus was a great combination. People cherry-picked Jesus. If you read Jesus throughout, look at the stories, the accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you find that Jesus of Nazareth, by today's standards, was one of the most judgmental people around. He was always judging. That's how he got himself killed, for goodness sake. You know, he made all these people mad at him because he was making a clear distinction between righteousness and unrighteousness, between faithfulness to God and unfaithfulness to God, even unfaithfulness that looked religious. And that's part of what's going on, that people are changing their theology. They're looking religious even though they're being unfaithful to the truth, okay? So Jesus was willing to communicate the truth, but he was filled with grace as well. And this is the two-part element, all right? It doesn't mean to be graceful doesn't mean drawing lines between truth and error, between right and wrong. Jesus did it all the time. Jesus said himself, to judge with accurate judgment, with righteous judgment is the way he put it. And so there is a place for that. Now in our culture, any righteous judgment is just going to be hate by their characterization. But we don't stand before our culture, we stand before God. And so this is before God, like Jesus, grace and truth come together in the same person and in our behavior. That's what an ambassador for Christ is to be like.
Greg Koukl, thank you very much.
You're welcome.